You ever look someone in the eyes, someone who's supposed to love you, and realize they'd rather see you fail than see you shine? My name's Lucas. I'm 34 years old, a single dad of two incredible kids, and for the better part of my life, I've played second fiddle to my dad's golden boy, my older brother, Trevor. Growing up, our house wasn't divided. It was a monarchy, and Trevor was the crown prince. My dad made sure of it. If Trevor brought home a B+, it was because the teacher was unfair. If I brought home an A, I must have cheated. When Trevor got into trouble for stealing a kid's bike in middle school, Dad said it was just boys being boys. When I got caught doodling in a library book once, I wasn't allowed to go to my friend's birthday party for the rest of the year. I wish I was exaggerating. But if you've lived under a roof with an entitled parent and their precious heir, you probably know exactly the kind of double standard I'm talking about. It didn't help that Trevor had this ridiculous charm. He could lie through his teeth and still get adults to grin and pat him on the back. Me? I was quiet, bookish, always looking for approval in the wrong places. I used to think if I worked hard enough, stayed out of trouble, and made the right choices, I'd earn my dad's respect. Spoiler alert, I was wrong. Our mom passed away when I was 12. Cancer. Quick and brutal. After that, Dad wasn't just biased, he was cruel. It was like he needed someone to blame for his grief, and since Trevor could do no wrong in his eyes, that left me. I remember standing in our dim kitchen after the funeral, wearing a suit that didn't fit, and hearing my dad mutter to himself, "At least she got to leave." I don't think he knew I was standing there. Or maybe he did. Either way, I never forgot it. Still, I stayed close. Maybe out of guilt. Maybe because I was afraid to admit how much I needed distance. I got married young. Too young, if I'm honest, and had my first kid, Ellie, at 24. My second, Liam, came 3 years later. Their mom left when Liam was a baby. No big story there, no scandal. She just wasn't built for motherhood and told me so one night over cold pizza and empty wine glasses. I respected the honesty, even if it broke me for a while. So yeah, I've been doing this dad thing solo for 6 years now. Anyway, I stayed in the same city, worked my way up slowly in the tech field, nothing flashy, just grinding. Meanwhile, Trevor bounced from startup to startup, always convinced he was one big idea away from being a millionaire. Dad funded most of his ventures. One of them was a luxury pet grooming app. Another involved drones that delivered sushi. I'm not making this up. Every time Trevor failed, Dad just chalked it up to bad luck and gave him another chunk of his retirement fund. Me? I paid for community college by working overnight at a grocery store and doing freelance coding on the side. So when I say that getting this job offer was a big deal, I mean it. I'd spent 3 years working on this open source project that got some attention in the right circles. Then one day, I got an email from a major software company, one of those household names that makes people raise their eyebrows when you casually drop it into conversation. They were looking for a new regional project manager for their AI initiative, and my name had come up. At first, I thought it was spam. But no, it was real. The interview process took 6 weeks, 3 rounds, a technical assessment, and multiple Zoom calls. And I nailed it. The offer came through on a Tuesday morning. My hands were shaking when I opened the email. 6 figures, full benefits, a relocation package, and most importantly, flexible hours and remote options so I could still be there for Ellie and Liam. I cried. I genuinely sat on my couch, staring at the screen, and let myself cry for the first time in years. Not just because of the job, but because, for once, I wasn't invisible. I waited a day before telling anyone. Not because I didn't want to share the news, but because I knew exactly what kind of reaction I'd get from Dad. And Trevor. They wouldn't be happy. Not really. Not if it wasn't Trevor getting the spotlight. And sure enough, when I called my dad and said, "Hey, guess what? I just got offered a huge position at," he cut me off with, "Wait, is this the same one Trevor applied for last month?" My stomach dropped. Yeah, apparently, Trevor had applied too. I didn't know that at the time. But apparently, Dad did. And now he sounded like someone just kicked his dog. They told him he wasn't a good fit, Dad muttered, like he was replaying the rejection in his head. But they gave it to you. I tried to keep it light. Yeah, wild, right? I guess my open source stuff helped. They said they'd been following my work for a while. There was a long pause. Then, well, don't let it go to your head. No congratulations. No, I'm proud of you. Just that. And look, I should have expected it. I really should have. But some part of me still hoped he'd be decent. That maybe, just maybe, I'd finally done something worthy of his respect. It didn't end there. The next time I saw him in person was the following Sunday. We were doing our usual awkward family lunch thing. Me, Dad, Trevor, and the kids. I brought Ellie and Liam because, despite everything, they adored their grandpa. And even though I had my issues with the man, I wasn't going to get in the way of their relationship. They didn't see the underhanded digs or the favoritism. To them, he was just Gramps, the guy who let them sneak cookies before dinner. We were at this outdoor cafe, nice enough spot, and I noticed Trevor wasn't really looking at me. His jaw was tight, and he kept checking his phone. I tried to keep things neutral. We talked about the kids' soccer game, Ellie's science project, typical stuff. Then Trevor, without even glancing up, muttered, "Hope you enjoy the job you stole." I blinked. "What?" He looked up, eyes narrowed. "You heard me." Dad didn't even flinch. In fact, he leaned back in his chair and folded his arms like he was watching a tennis match. "You know Trevor was their first choice," he said, sipping his drink. "If they weren't so obsessed with diversity hires, maybe." I cut him off. "Excuse me." Trevor smirked. "Oh, come on. Let's not pretend you didn't get lucky. You just happened to be working on a project they liked. Doesn't mean you're more qualified." "I didn't even know you applied," I said quietly. "I got the offer on my own merits." "Sure you did," Dad muttered. I looked over at my kids. Ellie was focused on her lemonade, but Liam was watching us with wide eyes. And something in me snapped. I stood up, said we were leaving, and walked the kids back to the car without another word. That should have been the end of it. But the next week, something happened that changed everything, and made it very, very clear just how far my father was willing to go to punish me for finally stepping out of Trevor's shadow. And trust me, that's where things started to get really twisted. The days after that cafe incident were quiet, but not in a good way. That kind of quiet you get when you know a storm's coming. Like the silence between the last clap of thunder and the first shatter of hail against your windows. My dad didn't call. Trevor didn't text. And I didn't reach out either. Part of me hoped that was it. That they'd just stew in their bitterness and let me move on with my life, raise my kids, start this new chapter with at least a shred of peace. But peace has never been the currency in my family. Control is. The new job came with a month-long grace period to transition in. I was wrapping up my final projects at my old firm while slowly onboarding with the new one. It was a hectic time, sure, but the kind of hectic that felt good. I had purpose. I was doing something that actually mattered. Ellie noticed the change in me. One night as I tucked her in, she looked up and said, "You smile more now, Daddy." Just like that. Simple. Unfiltered. And it nearly broke me. So yeah, things were finally looking up. Until Trevor showed up at my house. It was a Thursday evening, and I was making dinner. Nothing fancy, just grilled chicken and mac and cheese. Liam was sitting at the counter doing his math homework, and Ellie was in the living room setting up a fort made entirely out of couch cushions and misplaced laundry. There was a knock at the door. I assumed it was a package or maybe the neighbor needing help with her garden hose again. But no, it was Trevor. He didn't even wait for me to invite him in. Just brushed past me like he owned the place and started looking around like he was inspecting my furniture. "Huh," he muttered. "Didn't think this place would be so decent." "It's called a mortgage," I said flatly, closing the door behind him. "What do you want?" He turned around and smiled. That slick, smug smile he always wore when he was about to say something vile wrapped in silk. "Dad's giving me the lake house." I blinked. "What?" "The cabin. You know, the one in Silver Ridge. Mom's old place." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. That cabin had belonged to our mother's family for decades. She spent summers there as a kid, and I still remember how she used to braid my hair on the porch steps while telling me stories about the fireflies that used to light up the trees at night. It was her favorite place in the world. After she passed, the cabin sat mostly unused. I mowed the grass every spring, paid for the new water heater last year, replaced the roof shingles myself. Trevor, meanwhile, couldn't even point to it on a map. "You're joking," I said. "Nope," he said. "Dad's signing over the deed next week. Said it was time someone responsible took it over." That word hit like a slap. Responsible? Trevor just shrugged. "Hey, I didn't bring it up. Dad did. Said with all the stress you've got now, new job, 2 kids, single parent, maybe it's better someone else takes the burden off your plate." Burden. That was the moment I felt something twist in my chest. Not anger. Not even pain. Just something going cold. I nodded once, slowly, like my body was trying to convince itself to stay calm. Get out. He raised an eyebrow. Come on, Lucas. Don't be dramatic. I said get out. He finally took the hint and strutted back to his car. I watched him drive off, heart thudding in my ears, Liam asking me from the counter, "Was that Uncle Trevor?" and Ellie popping her head out from her pillow for it to say, "He still smells like burnt popcorn." I wanted to laugh, but my stomach just churned. That night, I drove to Dad's house. I didn't call first, didn't text, just drove through the dark, my headlights sweeping across old roads I'd traveled 100 times before. His porch light was on, and his truck was parked in the same place it always was, right beside Mom's old rose bush, now overgrown and half dead. I walked up, knocked once, then opened the door. He never locked it. He was sitting in his recliner, watching some rerun of an old detective show. When he saw me, he didn't even pause the TV, just muttered, "You could have called. We need to talk." He sighed like I was already wasting his time. "If this is about the cabin." "It is," I cut in. "You can't just give it to him. It's my property," he said, still not looking at me. "I can do whatever I want with it." "But it was Mom's," I said. "She wanted us both to have it." "That's what she said. Remember? After she got the diagnosis. She said we should share it." Dad snorted. "That was years ago. Things change." I clenched my fists. "You mean, Trevor screwed up enough times that you needed to give him something to keep his ego intact?" His eyes finally met mine. Cold. Flat. "Don't talk about your brother like that." "My brother?" I laughed bitterly. "The guy who's crashed every business you funded? The guy who uses people like tissues and then throws them away when they're dry?" Dad stood up slowly, like the effort annoyed him. "Trevor's trying. He's had a hard year. And I haven't." I snapped. "I've been raising 2 kids alone, working nonstop, keeping this family together when you couldn't even be bothered to show up to Liam's 5th birthday." "He didn't invite me," he said coolly. "I sent you the invitation myself," I said. "You said you were busy helping Trevor move into his new loft downtown." Silence. Then, "Look, Lucas, you're doing fine. You've got your kids, your job. You're stable." That word again, like it was some consolation prize, like it meant I didn't deserve anything more. I took a step back. "You never even asked if I wanted the cabin. You didn't need it." That was all he said. Just that. And in that moment, something broke. I realized then that it wasn't about the cabin. Not really. It was about what it represented. My mom's memory. A connection to the only person who ever made me feel like I mattered. And they were handing it over to the same guy who used to pour juice in my shoes and blame it on me. The same guy who once laughed when I cried at her funeral. The drive home was a blur. I barely slept. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Not to sue. Not yet. Just to ask questions. About inheritance laws. About property rights. About what could and couldn't be contested. And while we were on the phone, I told him something else. Something I hadn't planned to say out loud. "I think my dad's getting worse," I said. "Not just with the favoritism. I think he's unstable." My lawyer didn't say much. Just took notes. Asked me to keep a record of anything unusual. Said it might be important later. And it was. Because a week later, everything escalated. It started with a job announcement. The company made the hires public, posted our names on LinkedIn, issued a press release. I didn't think much of it. But apparently, Trevor saw it. And so did my dad. That weekend, I took the kids to the park. It was a crisp fall day, the kind where the leaves crunch perfectly under your shoes and the air smells like firewood and cinnamon. We stayed out for hours, swung on the monkey bars, played tag, ate warm pretzels from the little vendor near the pond. It felt like something out of a movie. When we got back to the car, I noticed it immediately. The shattered glass, the dent in the frame, the driver's window, completely caved in. Ellie screamed. Liam clung to my leg. And standing next to the wreck, looking utterly unapologetic, was my dad. He didn't yell, didn't pace, just stood there, arms crossed, breathing heavily through his nose like he'd just finished doing something that took effort. He looked at me, right in the eyes, and said, "That's what you deserve." I didn't move. Couldn't move. Ellie was crying now. Liam was asking why Gramps broke the car. And I just stood there, frozen. Then I heard a voice. Calm. Crisp. Coming from the Bluetooth speaker in my jacket pocket. "Did you get all of that?" my lawyer asked. Because here's the thing. He'd given me a recorder. Just in case things got heated. Told me to keep it running if I ever had reason to worry. And now? Now I had more than just a reason. I had evidence. And what my dad didn't know was that payback was already in motion. I didn't even call the police right away. Not because I didn't want to. Not because I didn't have the right. But because my daughter was still sobbing in the back seat of my car, and my son kept asking me if Gramps was going to jail with wide, confused eyes. That kind of innocence breaks something in you. It makes you realize how close your kids are to being scarred forever by people you try to protect them from. I swept up the glass with a blanket from the trunk, called a mobile repair service, and sat the kids on the grass a few feet away. I made a game out of it. Whoever finds the biggest piece of glass wins a gummy bear. That sort of thing. Ellie eventually stopped crying. Liam eventually laughed. But me? I was dead silent inside. Calm, almost eerily so. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't sad. I wasn't hurt. I was done. And being done with someone like my father? That's not just a boundary. That's a rebirth. I filed the report that night. Not just for insurance, though that was part of it, but for documentation. The officer who came by took photos of the car, looked over the recording I played for him from my lawyer's device, and whistled low. He really said that? The cop asked. Clear as day, I said. And the kids saw it. Yep. Do you want to press charges? I paused. And for a moment, I really considered it. I imagined the headline in our Sleepy Town's paper. Local man arrested after smashing son's car window in front of grandchildren. But then I looked over at the kids. Ellie was asleep on the couch, clutching a stuffed panda. Liam was building a Lego tower, completely oblivious. I shook my head. Not yet. Not yet. Because revenge isn't always about the explosion. Sometimes it's about the fuse. The fallout was fast. Word spread, quietly but quickly, among the family. I got calls from two aunts I hadn't heard from in years. One wanted to hear my side. The other offered a half-hearted, "Your father's just under stress. You know how he is." I didn't respond to either. I didn't post anything online. I didn't retaliate. I just stopped showing up. No more family lunches. No more birthday gatherings. No more polite texts on holidays. I withdrew, pulled my kids into our own little world. And for the first time, we actually felt safe in it. My father didn't apologize. Of course he didn't. He didn't even try. Trevor sent me one text, 3 days later, that just said, "You're blowing this way out of proportion. Chill." I didn't reply. I blocked him instead. And that silence? That absence? That was my first taste of real peace. But peace isn't a straight line. It's not something you just step into and hold. It's fragile, messy, and rebuilding after something like that, especially with two kids watching your every move, takes more strength than I realized. The job started in full 2 weeks later. It was remote to begin with, but I still woke up early every day like I had somewhere to be. Got dressed, made breakfast for the kids, packed their lunchboxes, dropped them off at school with a smile that was real for once. Then I came home, logged on, and gave this new opportunity everything I had. And they noticed. My new boss, Maya, was sharp. Kind, but sharp. She didn't care about resumes or degrees. She cared about results. And within a month, she was forwarding my code to the CTO with little notes like, "Lucas came up with a more efficient fix for this." I stayed quiet about it. Didn't tell anyone. But every little Slack message she sent chipped away at the years of doubt my father had carved into my bones. Then came the check. My first full paycheck from the new company. I opened the email with the stub attached, and my eyes actually blurred from how fast they welled up. It wasn't just the number. It was what it meant. That someone looked at my work and said, "This is worth something." Not because of who my brother was. Not because I had connections. But because I earned it. I took the kids out to celebrate that night. Nothing extravagant. Just a pizza place with those weird arcade games in the back. Liam won 2 stuffed animals. Ellie ate 3 slices of pepperoni and declared it the best day ever. And when we got home, she looked at me and said, "Are we rich now?" I laughed. Not rich. Just better. I could have stopped there. Could have let things drift into the past. Focused on my kids, my job, and the life I was slowly building. But life has a way of putting unfinished business back in front of you. The cabin came up again in early spring. I hadn't thought about it in months. I assumed Trevor had moved in, trashed the place, turned it into some party pad. But then I got a letter. A formal, stiff document with a heavy envelope and a law office logo stamped in the corner. Trevor was suing me. Apparently, he and my father had gone through with the transfer of ownership, but when Trevor tried to sell the place to fund his latest business venture, The county clerk flagged it. Something about a technicality. A lingering name on the deed. Mine. Turns out, Mom had done something smart before she passed. She had quietly added my name to the original deed as a co-owner with survivorship rights. It wasn't filed correctly, but it was enough to complicate things. Enough that Trevor couldn't sell the property without my consent. And now? Now he wanted me to give it up. The letter was full of threats. Intent to dissolve co-ownership. Failure to comply will result in further legal action. And my favorite. Given your current employment and parental obligations, we trust you'll want to avoid a prolonged court battle. I showed it to my lawyer. He read it, snorted, and said, "They have no idea what you've been building, do they?" I smiled. No, they don't. Because during those quiet months, while my father sulked in silence and Trevor kept crashing his financial sandcastles, I had been documenting everything. Every text, every voicemail, every old photo of the cabin showing me mowing the lawn while Trevor was off in Vegas. Every payment I made for repairs, supplies, maintenance. I had the receipts. I also had something else, stability. I wasn't the scared, scattered second son anymore. I had a good job, money in the bank, and a lawyer who believed in me. I had kids who looked at me like I was their world. And for the first time in my life, I believed I was worthy of that love. So I didn't respond to the letter. Not directly. Instead, I asked my lawyer a question. What would it take to keep the cabin permanently in my name? He looked up from his notes. You serious? I nodded. Dead serious. He leaned back in his chair. Well, in that case, we're going to need to play a little chess. And that's exactly what we did. Behind the scenes, we gathered evidence. Old wills, bank records, maintenance receipts, even a few emails from my mom, back when she was still alive, talking about how she wanted me to keep the cabin as a place of peace for you and the kids. They weren't notarized, but they were powerful. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not even the kids. I just kept showing up to work, making dinner, reading bedtime stories, living. Meanwhile, Trevor kept poking the bear. I got another letter, then a third, then a passive-aggressive call from one of his lawyers asking if I'd be willing to settle quietly. I let my lawyer handle it. But the best part, the part that made all the quiet rebuilding worth it, was when Trevor showed up at my doorstep again. Only this time, he wasn't smiling. He looked tired, older, like life had finally started to take bites out of him. He stood on my porch, hands in his pockets, and said, "Can we talk?" I leaned against the doorframe. About what? He didn't answer right away. Then he looked me in the eye and said, "Dad's selling the house. Moving in with me." I blinked. Why? Property taxes. Too much maintenance. He says he's done. I didn't respond. Trevor shifted. He wants to talk to you. I'm sure he does. Lucas, come on. This has gone far enough. No, I said quietly. It hasn't even started. Trevor stared at me for a long moment. Then he said something I'll never forget. You think you've won, but this is just petty. And I smiled. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to heal. But if they wanted a war, I had ammo. And they were standing in the blast zone. You ever have one of those dreams where you're back in a place you hate? An old school, a house, a job, but you suddenly realize you're not the same person anymore? That's how the next few weeks felt. I wasn't standing on the same shaky foundation anymore. I had traction now. Leverage. A sense of control I'd never felt before in that warped family dynamic. But I wasn't rushing anything. I knew I had one shot to do this right. One clean, undeniable shot. And I wanted it to land so perfectly that neither Trevor nor my father could twist the story when it was over. The first thing I did was visit the cabin. I didn't tell anyone. I dropped the kids off with their friend's mom. Ellie had a birthday party, Liam tagged along, and I made the 3-hour drive solo, windows down, music low. I hadn't been there since the summer before Mom passed. I remembered the exact turnoff, just past the rusted gas station with the broken vending machine and the faded Pepsi sign that hadn't lit up since 2003. When I pulled up to the cabin, I just sat there for a minute. It was quiet, untouched, still wearing that peaceful, haunting aura of a place full of ghosts, but not bad ones. The good kind. The kind that whisper instead of scream. The wooden deck was a little warped, but still sturdy. The porch swing creaked gently in the wind. There was a chipmunk staring at me from the steps like I was trespassing. I stepped inside and breathed it in. The faint scent of cedar and old books and the faintest hint of whatever air freshener Mom used to keep under the sink. I walked the perimeter slowly, ran my fingers along the windowsills, the frames, the table where she used to write postcards she never mailed. Everything was still here, everything she loved, and I realized that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming something that had been stolen, again and again, until now. Back home, I got to work. First, I looped in Maya, my boss. I didn't give her all the details, just that there was a potential property dispute I'd been pulled into by family, and that I might need to be in and out for court dates or legal meetings. Her response? Family's messy. Handle it. Just keep me looped in if deadlines shift. She didn't even blink. That one email gave me more emotional safety than my father had offered in 34 years. Next, I reached out to someone I hadn't talked to since college, my old roommate, Ben. He was a real estate lawyer now, one of those people who quietly becomes wildly successful while keeping the same cheap sense of humor and obsession with fantasy football. We hadn't spoken in years, but the moment I explained the situation, he said, "Dude, I remember your dad. Yeah, I'll help. Just don't make me go back to that weird Thanksgiving you took me to." Ben joined my legal team unofficially, helping cross-reference the ownership loopholes, filing history, and all the possible legal paths we could take. He didn't charge me for it. Call it delayed payment for that time. You helped me pass statistics. Together with my current lawyer, Ellen, who had the patience of a saint but the spine of a Navy SEAL, we formed what I started calling my quiet little rebellion committee. Every night, after the kids were asleep, I'd sit at the kitchen table with my laptop, papers, sticky notes, and a growing binder of ammunition. Because here's what we discovered. Yes, my father had tried to transfer full ownership of the cabin to Trevor, but he'd done it sloppily. The deed had been refiled, but not cleared through probate. Because my mother had passed without a full trust or will, she drafted one but never had it signed. All jointly owned assets were still in partial limbo, meaning any attempt to remove me from the co-ownership would need my signed consent, which I never gave. Add to that the paper trail, my mom's email notes, my old repair receipts, photos, texts. I even found an old voicemail she left me in 2011 that said, "Don't let your brother turn that cabin into a beer den." Ben said, "Legally, that voicemail's useless. Emotionally, it's a tactical nuke." Ellen agreed. We drafted a plan. Step 1. File a formal challenge to the title transfer. Not as an attack, but as a clarification motion. We wanted to bring everything into the light and ask the court to acknowledge my status as co-owner based on the evidence. No accusations, no finger-pointing, just clarity. Step 2. Prepare the narrative. Not the legal one, the human one. Because if this went public, if it reached mediation or even a small courtroom, I wanted the judge or mediator or anyone listening to understand exactly who Trevor and my father were. Not through insults, through facts. I built a timeline, a visual storyboard. My contributions, Trevor's absence, my mother's wishes, my father's ongoing hostility. Step 3. Sit back. Wait. Let them make the next move. And it didn't take long. Trevor showed up again. Not at my house this time, but at Ellie's school. He just happened to be there for a career day, representing one of his ghost startups. Ellie spotted him in the hallway, panicked, and called me from the nurse's office. I arrived in under 15 minutes. When I got there, he was sitting outside the main office, scrolling through his phone like it was all normal. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Networking," he smirked. "Your kid's school is full of future clients." "She's 9. He stood up, brushed off his blazer. "You need to chill out. You're making this bigger than it has to be. You tried to sell something that doesn't belong to you." He rolled his eyes. "It's not even about the cabin. It's about you finally thinking you're better than us." I didn't say anything, just looked at him. Then I smiled. Calm, quiet, the kind of smile that makes people nervous when they're used to you being silent. "You're going to wish you kept it about the cabin," I said. He stopped smiling. And that was the last time we spoke in person. Because 1 week later, the court summoned us for a preliminary hearing. And that's when I played my first card. The courtroom wasn't big. Just a small, wood-paneled room with buzzing fluorescent lights and a few rows of benches. Trevor showed up in a shiny suit that screamed "lease to own," and Dad came with him, stiff and scowling like someone had dragged him through a rainstorm. I sat on the other side. No suit, just a dark button-up and slacks. Clean, focused. When the judge asked to hear our positions, Trevor's lawyer launched into some overly dramatic pitch about financial burden and lack of contribution from the secondary co-owner. Then Ellen stood up, cool as ever, and presented a binder labeled Timeline of Property Stewardship, L. Carver. Inside were photos, receipts, dated emails, a notarized letter from my aunt who confirmed I'd been the only one maintaining the cabin since 2010, and a bullet-pointed list of every documented expense I'd paid out of pocket. When we laid out the maintenance costs alone, over $14,000 across 10 years, the judge raised his eyebrows. When we added the informal agreement between my mother and I, including her own handwritten note from a birthday card that said, "You take care of the cabin better than anyone. It's your place now," he nodded. Trevor looked like he wanted to vanish into his necktie. But the best moment? The judge asked, "Mr. Carver, do you have any response to these records?" Trevor opened his mouth, then looked at Dad, then closed it again. Because there was nothing to say. We left the courtroom that day without a decision, but I knew the tide had shifted. And now it was my turn to set the next piece in motion. Because I wasn't done yet. See, while Trevor had been busy scrambling to cover his tracks, I'd been doing a little digging of my own. About Dad. About his finances. About how he was quietly trying to transfer not just the cabin, but all his remaining assets into Trevor's name, including the house, his remaining savings, and a few small stocks. He was cutting me out entirely. And legally, he could. But not if we proved manipulation. Not if we proved coercion. Not if we exposed it all before he could finalize the transfers. So I filed one more motion. Not to claim the assets, but to contest the competency of his decisions regarding the estate, based on clear favoritism, documented aggression, remember the smashed window, and a history of biased treatment that endangered the emotional well-being of his minor grandchildren. The motion didn't accuse him of being unfit. It simply asked the court to delay any estate transfers until a formal review could be completed. A review that would involve interviews. Interviews with me, with Trevor, and with my kids. And trust me, Ellie doesn't forget much, especially when it comes to people who make her cry. This wasn't just about a cabin anymore. This was about history, about legacy, and finally, about justice. And what came next? That's where things got serious. Because the minute Dad found out what I was doing, he didn't just get angry. He got desperate. And that's when everything started to unravel. The call came 2 days after the motion was filed. I was finishing up lunch with my kids, grilled cheese and carrot sticks, nothing fancy, when my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. On the other end was a tight-voiced woman from a law office representing my father. She didn't introduce herself, didn't make small talk. She just said, "We'd like to know your terms for withdrawing the competency motion." I paused, letting her words hang in the air like steam off a hot mug. "My terms." I repeated. "Yes," she said. "Mr. Carver would prefer to avoid a public hearing." I looked out the window at my backyard. Ellie and Liam were playing tag, their laughter drifting in through the open screen. It was a beautiful day, sunny, calm. A good day to end a war. "I don't have terms," I said. "I have conditions." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Go on." I gave her the list. Clearly, calmly. No anger, no bargaining. Just facts. 1. The cabin would be signed over to me fully and officially, with no further dispute, transfer, or challenge. 2. Trevor and my father would both sign affidavits waiving any future claims to the property. 3. They would withdraw their lawsuit and agree to a sealed settlement preventing them from contacting my children directly or indirectly without my consent. "And if we agree to that," she asked, like she was expecting me to add more. I smiled. "Then I'll withdraw the motion and disappear from their lives. For good." She hung up without another word. I didn't hear anything for a week. Then, on a quiet Wednesday morning, my lawyer Ellen called. "It's done," she said. "They folded." She emailed over the documents. Finalized, notarized, signed. The cabin was mine. The lawsuit was dropped. The affidavits were filed with the court. Just like that, the war was over. But the real fallout? That took a little longer to settle. Let me tell you what happens when two men, used to winning by intimidation, suddenly find themselves powerless. They flail. At first, I expected them to retaliate in some subtle way. Gossip to family. Spread lies. Play the victim. And sure enough, within days, I got a call from Aunt Teresa. "Lucas, what on earth happened?" she asked, voice tight with drama. "Your dad says you're trying to destroy the family." I laughed. "Tell him the family destroyed itself." I just walked out of the fire. She didn't call again. Neither did anyone else. My father tried to reach me once more, a short email that read, "You're making a huge mistake. One day your kids will hate you for keeping them away from their grandfather." I didn't respond. I printed it out, slid it into the binder with everything else, and moved on. Because here's the thing they never expected. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive or messy or cruel. It was clean. It was legal. It was documented, structured, and strategic. I used their own arrogance against them. Their own actions. Their own words. That recording from the day he smashed my window? I never had to play it in court. But I submitted it anyway, attached quietly to the original motion, labeled as Exhibit B. Just in case. And it's still there. Part of the public record. A permanent echo of his failure. As for Trevor, last I heard, he burned through the last of Dad's savings trying to launch a cryptocurrency for pet influencers. You think I'm joking, but I'm not. Barkcoin never made it out of beta. He's living back in Dad's house now. The big one. The one Dad tried to leave him in the will before the court froze all transfers. Apparently, it needs a new roof. Mold in the basement. Foundation issues. No one's touched the property taxes in over a year. I got a letter from the county asking if I'd be willing to buy it at auction when it inevitably goes up for default. I declined. Let them live in the ruins they built. As for me, I kept the cabin. Not just legally, but spiritually. I took the kids up there the following summer. Fixed the shutters. Sanded the porch swing. Ellie painted rocks and lined the garden path. Liam found a squirrel and named it Trevor. We laughed so hard that day, I thought my chest would burst. One night, I stood on the back deck watching the sun dip behind the trees, the lake catching the colors like a mirror. Ellie came out, holding her blanket, sleepy-eyed. "Do you think Grandma would be proud of you?" she asked softly. I crouched down and brushed a leaf from her hair. "I think she'd be proud of us," I said, "for choosing peace." She nodded, leaned against me, and whispered, "I like it better this way." "Me too, kid. Me too. We still go there every year. Just the three of us. No drama. No screaming. Just pancakes, hikes, laughter, and long, slow mornings." I don't tell this story for sympathy. I tell it because someone out there needs to hear that walking away doesn't mean surrender. It means survival. And sometimes, if you do it right, it means victory. Final score? Dad. Broken windows, broken pride. Trevor. Lawsuits, debt, and squirrels named after him. Me? I got my kids, my peace, and the one place in this world that truly feels like home. And I didn't have to break a single window to get it.